a single-celled organism that split into two. That became 4, that became 6. It was this interaction of splitting, interaction wanting to stay together, that then led to, New York City, Detroit, right? Like society, all of it emerges from these simple interactions. And so for me, what's interesting about that as organizers is like people have been studying permaculture and biomimicry and like how can we learn from natural operating systems. Emergent strategy posits we are natural operating systems, and as organizers, we're saying we want to intentionally shape evolution and shape the future. And so it's like, how do we do that in a way that aligns with how nature shapes itself and shapes things, which is everything is small changes, right? The really big things that seem like really big changes are built on a ton of small shifts and changes, right? So even like an earthquake, earthquakes don't just come out of nowhere. People who study them are like, oh, this earthquake has been building for a long time. California, we can expect to have major earthquakes because there's tremors all the time, right? Small moves. So one of the things we want to get good at is how do we create the tremors? How do we create the small shifts that then allow for the massive shifts to happen? And how in our organizing do we embody the kind of relationships we want, yeah? So that's the nutshell. Okay, so here's what's working against us. We learn to disrespect indigenous and direct ties to land. We learn to be quiet, polite, indirect, and submissive, not to disturb the status quo. We learn facts out of context of application in school. How will this history, science, math show up in our lives in the work of growing community and home? I just want to say it took me so long to understand that what I had learned about vectors was also how I knew how to cross the street. I was like, wait! I should have known that when I was learning vectors. This is how you cross the street. Also, my body knows how to cross the street. We learned that tests and deadlines are the reason to take action. This puts those with good short-term memories and a positive response to pressure in leadership positions, which then leads to urgency-based thinking regardless of the circumstance. We learn to compete with each other in a scarcity-based economy that denies and destroys the abundant world we actually live in. We learn to deny our longings and our skills and to do work that occupies our hours without inspiring our greatness. We learn to manipulate each other and sell things to each other rather than learning to collaborate and evolve together. We learn that the natural world is to be manicured, controlled, or pillaged to support our consumerist lives. Even the natural lives of our bodies get medicated, pathologized, shaved, or improved upon with cosmetic adjustments. No shade if you have cosmetic adjustments, but it's just a question we need to be in. We learn that factors beyond our control determine the quality of our lives. Something as random as which skin, gender, sexuality, ability, nation, or belief system we are born into sets a path of survival and quality of life. In the United States specifically, though I see this in most places I travel, we learn that we only have value if we can produce. Only then do we earn food, home, healthcare, education. Similarly, we learn that our organizations are only as successful as our fundraising results, whether the community impact is powerful or not. We learn as children to swallow our tears and any other inconvenient emotions. And as adults, that translates into working through red flags, value differences, pain, and exhaustion. We learn to bond through gossip, venting, and destroying rather than cultivating solutions together. And perhaps the most egregious thing we are taught is that we should just be really good at what's already possible to leave the impossible alone.